Hello, this is Dr. John Spink, Assistant Professor, Department of Supply Chain Management, Business College, Michigan State University. This is a presentation I originally developed for a class I was teaching, a graduate class in 2006. I've used it through the years and then just updated here in 2021. And it's a generic template for what is a white paper. There's a follow-up presentation of what is a business case and what is a poster presentation. But this is following up what is a white paper. This also includes things like articles, chapters, could even be a book. The same concept and outline applies for any type of content you're producing, which could be a course, could be a lecture, or other type of presentation. Let's get started. So first off, what is a white paper? As I said, it does apply to other things as well. So this came about from a lot of different activities in the past, but one thing that was great is when I dealt with students with this and laid it out this way, one of the students said, I also think I get intimidated by the term paper, white paper, and the like. Once I understood it, I was fine. I also realized I really did know what they meant, but just had never heard it in those terms. So we're taking this concept of write a report, write a paper, and just trying to break it down into the core concepts. So for me, this started as working on a project with a group that had requested it, and they said, write a white paper. And I said, well, I want to scope it out. What are you looking for? What's the length? They said, just write a white paper. So I did a little research. Just do a white paper on the topic. Well, I Googled white paper, and there were 43 million hits, and it was probably 43 million different formats of one way or another. So that led me to try to look at a specification or a detail, a starting point anyway, and really something that I could build upon and then identify it as a specification and then recommend it, and then if someone could always tell me if they want longer, shorter, or whatever. So before getting into that, let's look at what is a white paper. So from Webster's dictionary, it's either paper bleached white, an official government report. So all of a sudden, that's where it kind of started, this whole idea of a white paper. But here's how it's used before. An authoritative report issued by an organization. So the TV network presented its white paper on news coverage of a major crime. So that's the example. So just an authoritative report. That's what a white paper is. Now, a white paper can be a similar type of foundation for something like an article or a chapter. Also, another definition is an official British government publication on a specific subject prepared by a committee and presented to the House of Commons, usually reporting results of a recent investigation or summarizing policy. So the British government does have something formal as a white paper specification, which is great for them because there's a clear specification. For us, really, we're looking at just this authoritative report. So there's no definition there saying it's 3 pages, no more than 10 pages, whatever. There's no details. So what I had to do for that project, because it went horribly wrong at the start, whatever I tried, it was not meeting their needs because they didn't really know what they were looking for. I developed my own standard template, and this is one that I share. So first off, there's planning tables below, and this is refined over time. And I don't know, I have 30 academic articles, and I don't know, 15 chapters, 2 books, things like that. So I've used it before, and it's led me to be very efficient in my writing. So first, there's an outline process, and the concept is provided below. I start, if it's a report of some kind, I start with 1,500 words. You know, a book chapter, if the specification is 5,000 words max, then I might start outlining 3,500 words, knowing I can always go longer. What drives me absolutely insane is to have a 10,000 word paper and have to whittle it down to 5,000. I would rather just rewrite the whole thing rather than do some type of triage there, because I've thought about it in its complete whole sense there in 10,000 words. So I really start and very rigorous and disciplined about starting with the word count, and then always know we can go longer. And there's this development process. Start at very high level with the concepts, ideas, scoping, framing, outlining, and then cycle deeper and deeper, and I'll go through that. References and citations. This is always interesting. And so if it's a white paper, say for a company or an association or something like that, I will get clarification up front. A lot of reports are written with the author as an expert, and they don't need a lot of citations. The only time something would be cited is if it's a quote. And usually it's not a footnote citation. It would some say in 2019 the Government Accountability Office wrote a report on blah blah, and here's what they said. So that's at a very high level of positioning you as an expert. But I say notice the quotes. Are you really an expert, or do people believe you're an expert? Or you could build upon lengthy scholarly citations. And one of the first big reports I did here at MSU had 183 citations in about a 20-page report. And actually that was something that industry made a comment on, that it was so heavily referenced they felt like it was more valid. But in general, the more formal the presentation, the more novel or the more confrontational your concept, then the more citations that are needed. If it's definitely controversial, then you want to refer to someone else. And you're just the ones summarizing the other reports, unless you do need to make some type of opinion yourself. Key recommendation: do not just start writing. I worked with a couple colleagues who did that. That's the way they thought. They just started writing, and sure enough, a 2,000 word paper ended up being 15,000 words, and it was a nightmare because it meandered and it didn't hit the target, and it was frustrating to read that much. It was even more frustrating to edit that much. So do not start writing. Plan it all out and basically get down to your outline being 100 to 200 word blocks. 100 words is not a lot. And the thing's great there is if you know exactly what you need to say in that 100 words and what you're saying just before and just after, then you can flow pretty easily through that. Also, it leads you to be very compartmentalized in your writing. So you can pick this up after months, know exactly where you are, maybe read a couple paragraphs ahead or sections ahead of it, and then just start writing. That's a key. So here's an example of a report that I did for the Michigan Department of Agriculture's Food and Protection Strategy team. It was a steering committee. And so we started very high and we identified the title. And then initiator, key there for the report was who wrote it, who was asking for it. It was traceability for food fraud prevention. And then we had a clear goal. So we could identify the goal. Well, let's go in here. But key there is at the bottom is identifying early on the length. And they all said, oh, that's fine. That's a good length. And I felt like 1,500 words was enough to explain the topic in enough detail. But if they needed more, they could ask us for more. So first is tightly scope it out and remind yourself of this constantly. Because as you write, you might find a new article, a new concept, and you'll meander off the path and maybe go down a rabbit hole in one way or another. So I will even sometimes write this out on a Post-it and keep it in front of me. So I'm reminded of what the target is. And then you look at the goal and the objective. And the objective is the plan of how you'll achieve this. So the goal is the overall idea, how the world will change because you've done this. And after that, then, the objective is the steps you're going to take to achieve it, how you're going to go about reviewing the paper. Start as short as possible, knowing it will grow. Also, maybe for some type of policy statement, they're happy with just the executive summary. You need a little bit behind it, but and that's a lot of times I find we write a 1,500 word report, and people really just read the abstract. But at least there's more there. I think also a real key is to know your audience from the start, and don't shoot too high. Like this was a public policy document for people that were looking at very high-level concepts. So we kept it very high level. We didn't go into a lot of detail, didn't use a lot of citations. So know what your audience needs and wants. Also, there's sometimes, if it's truly going to executives of a company, they don't want to read more than 500 words. So you can have enough behind it of 1,500 words and have some type of very short summary, as you'll see how I lay it out. Key here, this planning could be a tool for any type of report, article, chapter, even a book. You could start that out as the overall concept. And then within the book, you've got different objectives for these subcategories. Those subcategories could end up being entire chapters. Also, you could think about this, and we've used this for developing a conference or a course or a lecture or other things. Just starting very high, outlining, and going into detail. Just be for a conference, you wouldn't be writing up the chapter in text. You would be creating presentations. So to step back, the definitions here. So first off, goal, the conceptual aim of the project, the condition that will exist when the project has been successfully completed. So in the case of us of traceability is that we had talked about package traceability, product traceability, that with enhanced traceability, awareness of this topic will lead to the food supply chain to be safer. That's the goal. That's a really big idea at the top. So a key is thinking about what you're going to change for that reader and the overall concept. Then the objectives are specific operationalized statements necessary to achieve that project goal. Objectives should be smart, that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. So at that point then you're saying, hey, I will lay out the concept of food fraud prevention, traceability benefits by reviewing what is traceability, what are the problems, and how traceability helps reduce the problem, something like that. So you're identifying really clear what your objective is there. that the source for that is the Gates Foundation website. So if you're ever doing this, it's not a bad idea to get into this concept of using these goals and objectives as your scope yourself as a template, because there's people like the Gates Foundation or other types of grants or others that use these definitions. So if you're just familiar with it, then you're already one step ahead if you write grant proposals. Development process. This is the real key. And the cycle through this is really important. Plan, do, check, act. The quality process, the Deming wheel. And the key is scoping and starting very high level. I want to write and be efficient. So there's a lot of planning involved, and then the writing is a lot tighter, a lot easier, a lot more direct and faster. Almost routine or methodical, mechanical in a way. It's not really art. It's just putting together the concepts. So start very high level and cycle deeper and deeper, including reflection and refinement. That's a real key. So you look at if you start writing 5,000 words, then you're pretty stuck with that. It's hard emotionally to throw away 5,000 words. But if you've got an outline and you figure, well, you know what, that whole section should be up here or up there, or for the food industry, we're not going to cover beverages, or we should have beverages. If you decide that very early on, then you don't have to do the complete triage of your report. And note here that 1,500 word white paper, each body section is approximately 250 to 300 or so words. That is not a lot. Just look at some type of Word document you have and see how many words is 250 words. It's not a lot when you really start to think about a complex topic. So you really cannot go into too much detail, and that's a real key. This is a white paper. It's a summary paper. It's not a thesis or a dissertation. It's not the entire book yet. Each subheader is only 2 or 3 topics, because again, if you need 150 words to talk about a topic, then that's just 2 of them, and 150 is not a lot. So first off, you check your goal and objective and make sure it's okay. It's still meeting what you want. You do the iterative process. You just refine it. Then you do outline 1. So this is the titles of each category. And as I showed in the outline, introduction, I'll show next. Introduction, body 1, body 2, body 3. Oh, that should be body 3. And conclusion. So you've got three sections in the middle. You've got introduction and a conclusion. That's just the titles. So you start to think about what we're going to cover, like what are current traceability practices. Second would be what are the problems for food safety problems, and then body 3 would be how to apply a new technology to solve the problem and move from the current state. So that's just the basics. Now go for each subcategory, go a little deeper. So the introduction, go just at 2 bullet points there. So what you're trying to talk about, and the body, for body 1 you probably have 3 or 2 anyway. Just subcategory titles only. So within type of incidents, it could be import, domestic, and interstate commerce or something like that. Then you review that, make sure it fits and looks good. Then write out 1-sentence summaries of each subcategory. So there, if we said like food safety, imported products, then we would have just one fairly short sentence to explain what that section is going to talk about. See, as you go deeper and deeper, you now are breaking down to about 150 word blocks. You know that you've got an explanation of what that block is supposed to say, how it's supposed to transition from the one before and the one after. Then at that point, you've just got the sentences. Then start bullet pointing your ideas. What should be covered? An example, a type of topic, whatever it is, just to start to know what you're talking about. But a key is limiting it to only 2 or 3 points, because again, if it's 150 words, you really can't cover a lot of topics in there. Now, you may realize that this is not a 1,500 word paper, it's a 3,000 word paper. Well, that's fine, as long as the specification is okay, there's not a maximum, and you're fine with having more pain and suffering and writing and challenges. So it's just good to identify at that point. Where you're looking at these 150 word blocks, that's where it's really great to look at the inside of the paper like that. Then outline 5 is to list references or key sources for each section. So if it's a controversial topic, you'll want to reference it. Say if it's traceability, then it might be referencing the Institute of Food Technologists' work on traceability, FDA, other type of government regulations to make sure to talk about, or base it off the Food Safety Modernization Act or something like that. The key is then at that point, you now know what you're going to talk about in that 150 word section with 2 or 3 bullet points, and you have the key references there. So you're already getting really tight and compact. At that point, you're ready to start writing first manuscript. So, and write it from the inside out. So you've got those three body sections. Write those together because you're starting to then understand how they interact with each other. Also, if you're writing a 300-word block or 500-word block and you decide you're going to throw it away because it doesn't flow or whatever, then you don't have that much invested in it. It's really important early on to do that. And I would say even if you're writing a book, those sections could be the summary of each chapter. And then you could blow it out later, but then you know exactly what's in each section. It makes complete logical sense. So build it and write it from the inside out, body 1, body 2, body 3. Then write the conclusion, because now you know what you've talked about. Now maybe you add the Food Safety Modernization Act and not some USDA regulation. Maybe you did end up adding the National Organic Program within the USDA. So all of a sudden the conclusion now does include that topic or doesn't include that. You write the conclusion. At that point then you're ready to write the introduction. The introduction is not a background. The introduction is why you're writing this paper. And you then know what you're talking about, so you kind of write it in the rear view mirror to then go very broad of what are all the concepts, and you lead the reader right into the point of body 1, item A. Lead them right to it. They know why you're writing the paper, why it's important, and what's going to go on there. Then you write the abstract at the very end, very, very end. And along the way, the conclusion will only include what you covered, and the introduction will precisely lead into the body of the paper. So again, that's why writing from the inside out. Continue that till done. And you're writing a shorter paper. Even if this is an outline for a book, then each of those subcategories could be a chapter. And you're writing the summary for the entire chapter. So later you can then build it out, and again, each chapter you know exactly what you're trying to write about. And then you do the same process for each chapter. Continue till done, and process check. So did you hit your goal and objectives and scope? At each step here, you should review back to say, okay, are we really meeting that goal and scope, to reread that? Did you stay within the specification of the publication? Again, one time there was an article that was a certain length, a page length, and I used New Times Roman 12 font, but they were using Curry or something else, and so my 20-page paper went to a 30-page paper. That was a nightmare to try to scale it back. So always look at that, staying within specification or your own specification. Like for a book chapter, you might say you're going to stick to 5,000 words per chapter, and you can then judge if your outline is still staying at that level. So just some things to think about here is looking at a white paper and looking at the specifications for writing from Harvard Business Review. So they were saying the key to organizing and writing that effective white paper is tight focus on goal and objective. And the set of questions is excellent for assisting with that focus. In addition, there are important questions for that author. And from HBR is, what's the central message of the project? So to step back, and even before you're done, read your paper and write this out. Also, really, they're looking at something that I think is really important and a good target to strive for is what's new, useful, counterintuitive, or important about your project. And if you identify those few things that are truly innovative and novel, then this is reminding you to hit on those and hit them hard, hit them clear. Don't have that be really subtle. What are the real-world implications of the project? And can the central message be applied to business today? If so, how? This is great. So it's taking a summary of what is traceability and what's food safety problems and really changing it and making it active, really leading the reader into a call to action. And that really makes it very inspiring to write. But to step back to look at that central message that can be applied. And the application, I think, is so key. Who's the audience for the project? I mentioned that before. Why should a busy manager stop to read it? So if you do identify a good title, a good first couple sentences, a good summary, then people are going to read it and say, wow, this is something I really need to read. I need to see this. So that's a big hook to lead it to be enticing. What kind of research have you conducted to support the argument or logic in the project? So it's one thing just to state an opinion, and if you're supposed to be the expert and people believe you're the expert, that's one thing. But a lot of times, people that are reading it won't know you, or sometime in the future they won't. So it's really important or really helpful to really identify, that level of, what's the level of expertise. So someone that's new to this will believe you. What academic, professional, or personal experience will you draw on to make your argument convincing? In other words, what's your source of authority? Real key here. Now, if you're just hired to write a report for somebody, then they may just accept you as the expert. But really important, even more than that, if there are people that are skeptical that don't know you, is to, in a subtle way but direct, help to explain why this is something that is that they should listen to you. And these things just help to make, I think, some of the writing just a lot tighter and a lot more impactful. So that white paper outline. So in general, recommending that 1,500 words. So when you look at this, it's to provide a short, tight abstract first, and then that covers the entire topic, and then here's just that basic outline. So if it's 1,500 words, you're looking at the abstract of 100 to 150 words. I like them shorter. If you can cover all the topic in 100, people can read it quickly and understand it. You don't want to have them read pages and pages to understand what you're trying to say. You want to convince them and communicate. Have a scope of work in there at the beginning, why you're doing it, why you were asked to do it. Then the introduction to the topic and why write this report. So that's even shorter. That's down to 50 words. There's not a lot there. And then with the discussion, you've got 3 that are 250 words each. That is not a lot. And then the conclusion, 150 to 300. I like to go to the shorter end. Again, a tight conclusion that's very direct. People can see the call to action. Then after that are other things you might have later that are kind of outside the white paper. Our next steps are further review and your citations. Those wouldn't count in the word count. Key is short, tight summary and abstract at the start. You're trying to build everything up to this. Sometimes a paper goes from 1,500 to 15,000 words or so. And still then I would then go on and write a shorter white paper and then even write a shorter abstract. Sometimes the concepts are really long and big and you have to go long, but the key is getting down to this shorter, tight, concise 1,500 words and then down to the 150 words. References, if you need them, for students, you can refer to this. Discussion. So then also covering, that's what is a white paper. So what is a business case is covered in a later sense in another presentation. So the real reason a business case is the reason a business should make a resource allocation decision. And this should include analysis and comparison to all, that means all, other options for the enterprise. So business case isn't just saying, oh, you should buy this paint for your house. It really needs to be this, not that proposal. It needs to be really into a case. So that, for example, if a CFO can spend $1 million on only one project, should they pick your project? If you cannot answer this, then you're providing a project plan, not a business case, and that's a real key. That someone says, hey, tell me about paint. You recommend a paint, but that's just a project plan. It's not a real business case. So we get into that in the business case review. Then what is a poster presentation? So there again, it's interesting, people that are trying to put this together, especially students or others for the first time. We've got a deeper presentation on that, but we've got a template that's used to present an abstract. And a poster is an abstract, a summary. But it should be a complete explanation of the research project, including all conclusions. And then beyond that is make sure to use a specification, which I did not do several times. And that's looking at the poster size, orientation, font size, and others. Also, consider the font size and images for you to present. Will the reader be 12 inches from it, or will they be 12 feet away? Are you trying to draw someone in from far, or is this going to be something that it's got experts that are really interested in coming close? In that case, if someone's really far away, you don't want to have very small text. You want to have some big statements or some big images that draw people in. They know clearly what you're looking at. And if they're very close, then you could have a lot more content because they could actually read it. So just a thought here, opening thought about transparency. So, in the food and nutrition world, science is king. So when journals do not force scientists to fully disclose financial support and potential conflicts of interest, they're not helping anyone. And things that were interesting is back the Journal of the Medical Association, JAMA, requires authors to report all potential conflicts. Originally, it was a requirement back in the 1980s, and this is getting more stringent along the way. So I think at the end to have a statement of who is funding this, some of your background or any type of interest that you have is important to lead this report or article or chapter or book to withstand the test of time. If you're writing it for a class or for an association, that's fine. You're just identifying it. And then there other journals demand full disclosure. But it states so much research now funded by for-profit companies, and there's other issues that are in there, and I think it's just interesting to look at the start to think about and address the idea of disclosure, because that also leads your paper to be more convincing. If you do have outside interest, or you work for a company, or have worked for a company, or it's funded, then to mention it up front just clarifies that, and hopefully then reduces any other type of concerns. With that, I'll say thank you. Enjoy.